This is DKW as it lives and breathes.
DKW motorcycles are Erich Schreibner's great obsession. In the basement of his house, he keeps 37 of these world-famous machines, all lovingly restored and in fairly good running condition. Over many years, the 74-year-old Schreibner has put together a chapter of motorcycle history.
Collecting these motorcycles gets to be an addiction. It's like a stamp or a coin collector who just can't get enough. I wanted to stop at 8, but I kept making finds at motor shows and parts exchanges. Of course, most of it was just better junk, but that's how the collection came to be.
Erich Schreibner got his first DKW at age 16, and even though they stopped building the machines long ago, his enthusiasm for the great name in motorcycles has never waned.
I collect these bikes because they first saw the light of day in my hometown. That's Zschopau in the Erzgebirge Mountains.
In meiner Heimat erblickt haben. In Zschopau im Erzgebirge.
Zschopau is a small town in Saxony. Motorcycles have been built here for over 70 years. Despite political upheavals in Germany and the severe crises they caused the company, the long tradition has continued unbroken. Only the name of the motorcycle has changed over the years. Nowadays, the machines are called MuZ, or M and Z. They carry on the city's hallowed motorcycle tradition. Up until 1992, millions of the two-stroke engines were sold under the name of MZ. But it was the DKW company that laid the cornerstone for the tradition. The history of the Zschopau motorcycle makers began in this factory. The first chapter was written by a Danish engineer by the name of Jørgen Skafte Rasmussen. He had been producing fittings for steam engines since 1907. However, Rasmussen saw bigger opportunities opening up in mechanized transport. At first, he experimented with steam-powered cars, but met with little success. The German abbreviation for this type of vehicle is DKW, and a trademark was born. It wasn't long before DKW got a new meaning. It then stood for Dearest Kid's Wish. The first two-stroke engine to come out of Zschopau was a little toy motor, which didn't sell well. A haze of exhaust fumes hanging over the living room became every mother's nightmare. Things only began looking up for Rasmussen when he came out with a 118cc, 1-horsepower auxiliary motor for bicycles. It was helped along by a catchy slogan, DKW, the minor miracle, no mountain is an obstacle.
The motor was mounted in back on the carrier. They used to call it a butt warmer. Then later, they started saying, we shouldn't motorize the bicycle, but the rider. And so they built machines that had more the character of a motorcycle.
Die schon mehr den Charakter eines Motorrades hatten.
The Reichsfahrt model came on the market in 1922. It had a belt drive and no clutch. For public relations purposes, the bike was entered in motorcycle races and scored a big success. DKW's victories with their Reichsfahrt model were the beginning of a long and glorious career in racing for Zschopau motorcycles. Unlike many other manufacturers, Rasmussen opted for the two-stroke engine. For many years, it would be a typical feature of motorcycles from Zschopau. Times were hard in Germany after the First World War. There was hardly enough money for life's essentials, let alone a motorcycle. DKW's head sales manager, Dr. Hahn, came up with the revolutionary idea of the installment payment plan. A motorcycle could be financed at a rate of $12.50 a week, which gave the company a sizable edge over the competition. This was one part of the great success enjoyed by the E206 with its two-gear transmission. By 1928, only 9 years after it started up, DKW had grown into the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer.
Der Rasmussen hat 1922
Rasmussen took on two new people in 1922. One was the designer Hermann Weber. All of the post-1922 models bore his mark. The other was the marketing head, Dr. Hahn. He loaded up a bus with the bikes and drove from town to town, setting up a DKW workshop. You could almost say in every blacksmith's. And that's how DKW got to be known.
And got to be bigger and bigger. Rasmussen put the company on a growth heading at full risk, buying up suppliers and competitors such as the Zschopau motorcycle producers and integrating them into his own company, which had since gone public. Producing motor drives was another source of revenue for DKW. The simple, lightweight two-stroke engines generated power for many kinds of equipment, from fire engine pumps to lawn mowers. The corporate empire even produced airplanes and fitted them with DKW engines. Rasmussen was involved in the car business as well. The P-15, a small car with rear-wheel drive and a wooden body, was introduced in 1928. A radical innovation in automaking was the use of a two-stroke engine adapted from the 15-horsepower ZSW 500. In 1929, DKW took over the Audi plant in Zschopau. DKW had joined the club of high-class autos. Two years later, DKW came out with the F1, the first car with the now common front-wheel drive. In true DKW style, the motor was, of course, an 18-horsepower two-stroke. DKW was to produce many more models over the years. Two-stroke engines, front-wheel drive, and a low purchase price remain the trademarks of DKW autos. But the greatest source of income for the company in Zschopau has always been the manufacture of motorcycles. A lot goes into building their image and ad campaigns.
Das ist die sogenannte Blutblase.
This is what's known as the blood blister. In contrast to the other machines, it's got a red gas tank. I've got a story about that. In 1930, there was a margarine company called Firma. If you bought 3,500 kilos of margarine, they threw one of these blood blisters in with the deal. Our baker went for it. Then the baker went broke. Whether it was because of all the margarine he couldn't sell, or something else, I don't know.
DKW was the first motorcycle factory in Germany to introduce the assembly line production that had been invented by Henry Ford in America. In 1929, over 60,000 motorcycles rolled off the lines in Zschopau. 2 years later, the number had sunk to 12,500. Production was faltering. Rasmussen's expansionism had saddled both Audi and DKW with enormous debts. Other vehicle manufacturers were not doing any better. At the root of the slump was the Great Depression. Unemployment in Germany was increasing rapidly. By 1931, it had hit 5 million. Many companies went bankrupt. In an effort to ensure the survival of Saxony's automotive industry, the region's leading auto and engine manufacturers, Wanderer, Porsche, Audi, and DKW, fused in 1932 to form the Auto Union. The 4 rings of the new enterprise's badge symbolized this fusion. Led by Adolf Hitler, the Nazis came to power in Germany. Hitler ordered the establishment of job creation programs and the rearming of the Reichswehr. The economy slowly began to recover all over the world. Production at DKW got rolling again. In spite of the quotas imposed on tires, iron, and steel, the motorcycle makers under the Auto Union's umbrella once again took the lead as the world's largest with a market share of 63% in 1938. DKW's export figures alone outstripped the total number of motorcycles produced in the United States. The Zschopau motorcycle's robust and simple design was held in high esteem the world over.
Das waren alles ordentliche Gebrauchsmaschinen.
These machines were real workhorses. They weren't so much designed for high performance. I rode my DKW for a long time and never had anything go wrong with it. The frame never broke, the cylinders never froze up, nothing like that at all.
The cycle's dependability was put to the test on the racetrack as well. Right from the start, DKW had made a first-class racing division one of their highest priorities. Almost 100 employees were assigned the exclusive task of coaxing the highest performance out of the two-stroke motors. For years, DKW dominated motorcycle racing in all engine displacement classes. They won Grand Prix and German and European championships by the dozen. It was the best advertising there could be for the mass-produced Zschopau machines. The Auto Union's silver racers were virtually unbeatable on car tracks as well, establishing a name for the enterprise worldwide. The Auto Union was riding on top, but differences of opinion led DKW chief Rasmussen to give up his position as chairman of the corporation. One success followed another. DKW sold more than 70,000 of the 3-horsepower RT100s alone. By early 1939, DKW had produced a total of 500,000 motorcycles and become the financial pillar of the entire Auto Union. Hitler's invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939, touched off the Second World War, bringing destruction on an unimaginable scale. Zschopau shifted to production for the war effort. The NZ350 was built for Hitler's Wehrmacht and used to carry dispatches in the battlefield. Before DKW shut down civilian production, Chief designer Weber created his final masterpiece, the RT125. For years to come, the 5-horsepower machine was to be copied by many other manufacturers. It could only be built for a short time in Zschopau. In May 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war was over. Germany lay in rubble. Some 400 Jewish women and 900 foreign forced laborers were liberated from the DKW factory. Before the end of the war, the chairman of the Auto Union had escaped Russian troops fleeing to Ingolstadt in Bavaria. There he founded a new Auto Union and started production again in the early 50s, based for the most part on the pre-war models.
Yes, the DKW is back. Tens of thousands of DKW vehicles have already rolled off Auto Union production lines. Major production plants have opened in Ingolstadt and Düsseldorf. Here you see the new RT125 with the trusty DKW 2-stroke known to millions. It can do over 80 kilometers an hour on an average consumption of only 2 liters. And this is DKW's line of light trucks with their indestructible DKW 2-stroke engines and swerve-proof front-wheel drive. And finally, we have the long-awaited DKW luxury class with its spacious interior. Whether it's the elegantly designed sedan or the sporty convertible, its handling on the road is unforgettable. It runs over 100 kilometers an hour on 6 1/4 liters average consumption. A
few years later, the company changed its name back to Audi and is now one of Germany's leading car makers. Motorcycle production ceased during the 60s. It was the final curtain for the world-famous two-stroke motorcycle called DKW. But the fans' love for the great name in motorcycles lives on to the present day. They come together once a year in midwinter. The Augustusburg Castle in Saxony, with its motorcycle museum, becomes a mecca for the aficionados and their ancient machines. For 2 whole days, vintage DKWs and their East German successors, the MZs, are at the center of attention. Zschopau's newest machines are subjected to a thorough examination and compared with other makes now turning up at the DKW and MZ riders' traditional winter gathering outside of Zschopau. Christian Steiner shows up every year. He's worked in management at the Zschopau motorcycle makers for 44 years now. To this day, it's still a minor miracle to him that through all the hardships, DKW's hometown, Zschopau, was able to carry on its motorcycle making tradition after World War II.
As far as I'm concerned, it was a heroic effort on the part of these people to get motorcycle production up and running again so quickly after the war, with no machines or facilities available.
The DKW plant's old production facilities had been dismantled. A new beginning in Zschopau, located in the Soviet occupation zone, was even more difficult than in Ingolstadt.
After a transitional production phase, in which we made shovels, stovepipes, kitchen scales, and things like that, we gradually edged our way back in. And by 1949, we were exhibiting the first 3 motorcycles at the Leipzig Trade Fair. They were RT-125s.
As in Ingolstadt, Zschopau started producing models developed before the war. East Germany was founded. From then on, the Socialist Unity Party had the say in East German politics. The Zschopau plant developed the BK350 with its sensational horizontally opposed piston engine. For a short time, the bikes from the Erzgebirge Mountains were called IFA. Later it became MZ, standing for Motorcycle Works Zschopau. By then, the works had been nationalized as a people's own enterprise. With new production facilities and new models, things started looking up again in Zschopau. The first machine developed under the name MZ was the 12.5 horsepower ES250. MZ carried on DKW's two-stroke tradition. August 1961. The East German government sealed off its borders to the west and built the Berlin Wall. An entire country was locked up. The borders cut off badly needed materials from the west. In spite of all the obstacles, MZ managed to steadily increase its turnout. They even surpassed DKW production records. Up to 86,000 MZ cycles were sold annually. Once again, it was racing that put the MZ out in front. The East German two-stroke cycles fought their way up to take the lead internationally. The sturdy engineering held up especially well cross-country. By the 80s, the enduro sport had become the jewel in the MZ's crown. But racetracks also forged another link back to the glorious DKW days. Victories in World Championship races made the new name of the Zschopau two-stroke bikes known the world over. Exports also profited from the racing business. 65 countries were taking delivery of MZ machines. The main buyers were East Germany's socialist sisterlands. Sales in West Germany were arranged through the Neckermann mail order house. There, Opinions on the Zschopau motorbikes differed. For one small circle of fans, they're the ideal workhorses for everyday knocking about. But most poured scorn and derision on the MZs. To them, the rattling two-strokes were just cheap heaps from the East. In East Germany, the MZ, having been appointed the official state motorcycle, ruled the roads. For the walled-in country's citizens, there was virtually no alternative to the MZ. They couldn't afford motorbikes from the West and often had to wait more than 10 years for a car. For many, taking to the road on an MZ meant at least a tiny bit of freedom.
We lived in a completely walled-in society, and so it was important to make the most of what few travel opportunities we had. For most people, these motorcycles gave them their first chance to go to Czechoslovakia or Hungary or Bulgaria, and people were very eager to do just that. And the motorcycles were particularly well suited to handling these long distances without problems. Even if something did go wrong in a foreign country, you could always do something about it. You could fix it faster.
The engineering was solid, but the design antiquated. It wasn't until the 80s that the bikes were made a bit more appealing to the customer's taste. Even so, nearly 2.5 million MZ motorcycles were sold. November 1989. The end had come for the East German regime. The wall fell. After 40 years, freedom had returned and Germany was united. From then on, former East German enterprises had to start adapting to a market economy. For many of them, a hopeless task. And once again, motorcycle production in Zschopau hit new lows. The principal customers in Eastern Europe were unable to pay for the MZs in hard Deutschmarks. The company's sales took a dive. Even new innovations didn't bring the hoped-for success. 40 years of socialist economic planning had left its marks. The production technology was obsolete. It was impossible to produce efficiently in the same cramped and twisted halls the DKW bikes had been built in. In June of 1992, 2.5 years after reunification, it was all over for the MZ company. But, as it happened so often before in Zschopau, the motorcycle building tradition survived the worst of crises. From the MZ, the MNZ was born. Housed in new quarters, the fledgling enterprise will carry on over 70 years of motorcycle history spanning the DKW and the MZ. Peter Koros has taken on this challenge. Along with 2 other managers from the West, he's managed to put together a new company from the pieces of MZ. Aside from BMW, it's the last surviving German motorcycle manufacturer. It took a powerful shot in the arm of millions in state financial assistance to keep the company going after the collapse of MZ. Of over 3,000 former employees, 250 were kept on. Now, only 170 are still working here. One must be content with the role of a small motorcycle builder in a market dominated by the Japanese and Italians. It's not easy for MZ to take up the legacy of their successful predecessors.
DKW and to a certain extent MZ set the standards, and now we're making an effort to head in the same direction.
New models are meant to help to do just that. M&Z calls their great hope the Scorpion, a 48-horsepower single-cylinder machine. It's already been highly praised by the experts and awarded several design prizes. The brand new 60-horsepower replica is even sportier. It was developed from the Scorpion. When they discontinued the production of motors, M&Z discarded the 2-stroke tradition of the Zschopau motorcycles. The Japanese manufacturer Yamaha furnishes the new 4-cycle units. The Austrian Rotax company delivers the power plants for the country as well as the Silver Star Classic, the first cycle built by M&Z. But even with new technology and a fresh design concept, The new Zschopau motorcycles haven't exactly sold big. In 1994, MuZ was able to move only 5,000 of the planned 8,500. It's an image problem inherited from their predecessor, MZ.
Some motorcycle riders have the feeling they have to justify buying an M&Z to their buddies, and this is the image we're trying to change. Of course, I realize you can't change an image built up over 30 or 40 years in 6 months just because you've got a new motorcycle. That takes time. But I hope that in 1 or 2 years things will be different. In other European countries, we don't have this negative image at all. We have a fantastic image in England. We have a very respectable image in the U.S. And it's quite a bit easier to sell motorcycles there than it is in Germany.
Even in a motorcycling nation like Spain, there aren't the kind of image problems that exist in Germany. 50% of M&Z's production is now being exported. In Calafat, south of Barcelona, M&Z puts on a presentation for dealers and journalists. The new models pass all the experts' critical tests. The Replica and the Scorpion also make a good showing at the racetrack. The bikes get a good reception. A ray of hope shines on M&Z's horizon. The company is looking to racing to give them a new tailwind. They're hoping to pick up the thread of history running through the M&Z back to DKW. To get a good start into a successful future, however, the new company will first have to make a good name for itself among motorcycle fans. A name change might be of some help in turning the bike into a coveted collector's item. Minor miracles happen all the time.
They won't really be able to start selling this M&Z until they start calling it DKW again.
Hoch DKW, hoch DKW, dir soll mein Lied erklingen. Und früher oder später doch wird bald Junges singen. Sieht man nicht nur, hört man nicht bloß, gleich brennt das Herz wie Fonder. O DKW, o DKW, du bist und bleibst das Wunder. DKW, voran, DKW, voran, du bist und bleibst das Wunder.